Assalamualaikum and very good day. So my name is Muhammad Hamizan bin Adnan and currently I am doing internship in Carrier Malaysia headquarters at Puchong. So for this presentation I am going to talk about refrigerant specification. So for the first thing, before we going to talk about the refrigerant itself, I will discuss about the refrigeration cycle, which involve the movement of refrigerant starting from the compressor into the condenser and then expansion valve, and lastly the evaporator. So in the first stage of the cycle, which is the compression cycle, the process occurs in the compressor where the refrigerant is compressed and increase its pressure and temperature. So after this process has completed, the refrigerant will then goes into the condenser. In the condenser, the refrigerant will undergo a phase changes from gas to liquid, and the process that occurs in this condenser is called condensation. So after this process, the refrigerant will then goes into the expansion valve where the refrigerant flow is throttled and then resulting in the decrease in terms of refrigerant temperature and also refrigerant pressure. And lastly, it will goes into the evaporator where evaporation process occurs. So in the evaporator, the warm air will lose its heat into the cool refrigerant, thus providing cooling effect in the evaporator. And then the refrigerant will return back to the compressor, completing the refrigeration cycle. Okay, so for the next slide is the ideal refrigerant criteria. So as we can see, there are 6 items in this slide, which is the significant criteria for choosing the right refrigerant to use in any air conditioning or refrigeration system. So let's take a look at the first item, which is ozone depletion potential, or also known as ODP. So in current time, most of the refrigerant would be preferred to have either low ODP or zero ODP in order to reduce the impact of the refrigerant towards the depletion of stratospheric atmosphere. And then the next item is global warming potential, or also known as GWP. So normally, refrigerant that has high value of GWP will have a huge impact towards the global warming. So for current time, most of the refrigerant that is being used in air conditioning and refrigeration system doesn't matter either residential or in commercial system, they will implement the same thing using refrigerant that has low GWP potential. And most of the refrigerant nowadays usually has low value of GWP. For example, R32, R410, and R513A. And then for the next item is toxicity. So for this criteria, it relates to the safety of the person who are handling the refrigerant during installation process. So refrigerant that has low toxicity level will be much more preferred to be used in the system because we can ensure that the installation will be done without any issues, especially health issues towards the person who are handling the refrigerant. And then the next criteria is also quite important because it also relates to the safety of the person in charge of the installation process. So for flammability, and in the current time, mostly non-flammable refrigerant will be much more preferred to be implemented in the AC system, because for the same reason, to ensure the safety of people who are handling the refrigerant. And then for the next criteria is one of the most significant criteria for refrigerant, which is the refrigeration effect. So refrigeration effect is related to the thermodynamic properties of the refrigerant. So for example, R32, they can be operated at low pressure, meaning that the chiller and other equipment will not have to put extra, or they will not require extra energy to operate, meaning that the system can operate at low power consumption. And even though with the operation is at low consumption level, the refrigeration effect produced by this refrigerant R32 is quite good, and they can give a faster cooling effect compared to other refrigerant. So mainly this refrigeration effect is affected by the ability or the properties of the refrigerant in terms of their heat transfer rate and also the energy consumption when operating the system using the refrigerant. And for the last part is the properties. So to be more specific, these properties also relate to the previous criteria that we have discussed. So let's say that there will be a new substance to be used as a refrigerant in the system. The substance is required to meet up the criteria such as ODP, GWP, toxicity, flammability, and refrigeration effect. So they should have the same or almost the same characteristic, just like the previous refrigerant. So given that they have all these characteristics, there will be no need to modify any currently available system, and that will save up quite a lot of costs, or save up in terms of costing, because we can implement the new substance in the currently available air conditioning and refrigeration system. Okay, so for the next and upcoming slide, we will be going through the different type of refrigerant which is implemented by Carrier in their product lineup. So for the first refrigerant is R1233ZDE. So for this refrigerant, it is suitable to be used in low pressure centrifugal chiller, which is usually installed for large building, and it is applied for most of the chiller lineup offered by Carrier. And its significant features is the low value of GWP and also zero ODP. So these two features themselves offers a good traits of the refrigerant, meaning that they can be applied to chillers without having significant negative impact towards the environment and also the ozone. And then it is also non-flammable, so which is good because for the safety of the operators who are operating the chiller. And the most important features of this refrigerant is the high heat transfer rate. So meaning that due to its thermodynamic properties, it can transfer heat from the refrigerant to the air, which is passing through the cooling coil with high efficiency. And to be more specific, high efficiency refers to the ability to provide cooling effect with minimal power consumption of the chiller. Okay, for the next refrigerant is the R410A, also known for its low GWP value, meaning that it will less likely to impact the global warming. And the refrigerant also contains zero ODP, which is good because it won't affect the depletion of the ozone layer. And the most important features that this refrigerant has is the refrigerant itself is widely adopted worldwide. So meaning that it is available in, let's say in Malaysia, most part of the country apply or implement this refrigerant in the system, meaning that it is available almost everywhere. So in case of any maintenance issue that requires the charging of the refrigerant or also replacement of the refrigerant, it would be a huge problem for the any person that is handling the replacement issue, because the refrigerant R410A is available almost everywhere. So let's move on to the next refrigerant, which is R513A. The features of all these refrigerant is almost the same in terms of GWP, ODP, energy efficiency, and also their toxicity traits. So the first point is low GWP, and this refrigerant least likely to impact the global warming, and also it possesses zero ODP, which is very good because it won't affect the ozone depletion. And next is the refrigerant is considered energy efficient due to its properties that allows high rate of heat transfer. So how does this high rate of heat transfer occurs? It is related to the condensing and evaporating temperature of the refrigerant itself. So especially when the certain refrigerant has low condensing temperature and also low evaporating temperature, the the parts in the chiller like compressor won't be required to run at, or won't be required to use high amount of energy. So meaning that this refrigerant will be a good choice for certain model of chiller that should be operating using low consumption of power. Sorry for the mistake. And then for the last part is the refrigerant has low toxicity and non-flammable. So it will be considered safe to be handled by any person that is operating the chiller or also performing maintenance works on the chiller. Okay, next we move on to R134A. So this refrigerant is considered ozone friendly because it has low value of ODP, and it also worldwide adopted, meaning that it is available almost in all part of a country, which is good because it will be easier for any person that is doing maintenance work on the chiller. So the availability of the refrigerant would not be an issue. And lastly, this refrigerant has wide range of application because it is also being implemented in automotive air conditioning system. So for the final slide of my presentation is regarding the R32 refrigerant. It has low GWP and zero ODP, meaning that it will have less impact towards the environment, especially the global warming and also ozone depletion. And one of the interesting features in this refrigerant is it operates in lower pressure. So meaning that by having low condensing and evaporating temperature and also pressure, it will make the chiller to operate at very low power consumption. So we can consider that this refrigerant is very efficient, and also by having that low condensing and evaporating temperature, besides that characteristic, it also possesses high heat transfer rate. So by implementing this specific refrigerant, it can be ensured that the system will operate at a high level of efficiency. So all of those refrigerant that I have mentioned in my presentation is the refrigerant that is currently being used in Carrier's product, especially the chillers lineup. So looking at the characteristic of the refrigerant, we can say that Carrier is focusing on implementing air conditioning system that have less impact towards the environment. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you.